Douglas Carl Jones was a 35-year-old from Simpsonville, South Carolina. He was a plumber and former star athlete. In the late afternoon of July 30th, 1997, Doug bought some items for a job he was to do that evening. He never arrived at the work site. Doug's truck was found near his home the next day. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Dentzel, and this is Unfound. I'm not sure if any of us can say that our lives have turned out the way we thought. Kids or no kids, one marriage, many marriages or no marriages, wealthy or not so much, skinny or not so skinny. I got to tell you, to me, the more I live, the more I discover that reaching our goals or not is about 90% out of our hands. Many things just happen. And there's probably no clearer example of this than the work we end up doing as adults. Yes, maybe as kids we all had dreams of walking on Mars or something. I can remember writing about that in like 1982. But the reality is, the levels we reach are much more earthbound. And we could have never guessed at 40 or 50 years old that we would be doing what we do to provide for ourselves and our families. People who drop out of high school end up running their own businesses and are the envy of all the high school graduates. People who get all sorts of degrees at some point decide it all wasn't worth it and take jobs that are not in the same sector as their education. A students end up working for C students. It's all, for the most part, unpredictable. Hey, if you would have told me I would be doing Unfound 5 years ago, I would have said, what? Well, in the disappearance of Doug Jones, he was on his way to becoming a well-known football player. Maybe he could have been in the NFL if fate and evil hadn't intervened. Instead, he became a master plumber, and after visiting a supply store, he headed to his next work appointment. Then he disappeared. And we're left to wonder what happened on the job. And now a summary of the case. Doug Jones was one of 3 brothers and a talented athlete. He looked to have a promising high school sports experience ahead of him. But his enemies had other plans. They slipped him a psychedelic drug, causing his personality to permanently change. Doug was never the same. He lost friends and quit his current high school to move to another one. Yet things didn't get any better there. However, once Doug reached early adulthood, he had gotten diagnosed and been put on lithium, which seemed to work. However, when Doug was off his medication, he returned to his old ways of aggression and violence. Yet, with this newfound state of good mental health, Doug became a plumber, got married, and had 2 children, although people admit that the marriage was rocky. So, on July 30th, 1997, Doug carried out his job as he usually did. He worked for himself so he could make his own hours. And around 5 p.m., he stopped at a home improvement store to pick up a couple parts he needed for work he was going to do that evening at a church. In addition, Doug had just gotten paid for a previous job and cashed a $1,500 check. The belief is that he would use that money for the Disney trip he and his family were taking the next day. However, Doug never arrived at the church to complete his plumbing work. Doug's wife says he didn't come home that evening either. He was never seen again. The next day, a woman in Doug's neighborhood noticed his truck parked off a back road beside a creek. about 1.5 miles from Doug's house. A search of the area revealed no signs of Doug, and his truck showed no signs as to why Doug disappeared. In addition to Doug, his wallet, beeper, truck keys, and the $1,500 in cash were missing. Oddly enough, his wife with one of their children, along with a friend and that friend's child, still decided to go on the Disney trip. Doug's disappearance is made complex by the fact that he actually left his family a few years before that. However, after 3 days in Charlotte, North Carolina, he had a change of heart and returned to them, and never did something like that again. Yet questions regarding other issues remain. Number 1. Yes, Doug's truck was found near his home, but why was it found on a road that was off the route to his house? Number 2. Why is there no record of anyone at the church trying to contact Doug when he didn't show up that evening? And number 3. Although it seems highly unusual from the outside, is there a rational reason that Doug's wife decided to go to Disney anyway? Doug's family is pretty much set on one particular scenario regarding Doug's disappearance. The guest for this episode is Doug's brother, Hal Jones. Unfound News. This Monday, September 28th, on Zoom, if you are a premium Patreon member, the next Unfound on the Ground is happening. The topic is prioritizing accuracy and navigating controversy for missing persons cases. However, this is important. The starting time for this forum will be 8:45 p.m. Eastern Time, unlike the previous ones that started at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. Once again, the starting time Monday will be 8:45 p.m. Eastern. To become a member of the On the Ground Forum, please go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast and sign up at the $12 a month level or above. Next, did you catch my third interview with Dr. Grace Telesco? I always enjoy talking to her. We covered the disappearance of Eric Alvarado. If you missed it, just go to Nova Southeastern University's YouTube channel to catch the replay. Finally, before you hear my voice again for an episode, another newsletter will have come out. Be looking for it in your email. Thank you. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on Podomatic, iTunes, Stitcher, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, Deezer, Facebook, and YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us on our podcast channel for the Unfound Live Show. All of you can talk with me, and I can answer your questions. Contribute to Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. You can also contribute at PayPal, paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the brother of Douglas Jones, Hal Jones. Hal, welcome to Unfound.
Well, thank you. I'm very glad that you are doing this for the family.
You're very welcome, Hal. That's what we do. We've enjoyed doing it, and we've been doing this for 4 years, so you're welcome. Let's start here. As we usually do on Unfound, we usually start talking about just the family dynamics first. You are Doug's brother, older brother, younger brother, and how many siblings do you and Doug have?
I'm Doug's older brother, and we have one other brother, which was the youngest. Doug was the middle child.
Okay, so three brothers.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And you and Doug, would you say that how many years between you two?
There was 2.5 years between Doug and I, and 4 years between me and our youngest brother.
Okay, so all very close in age. Pretty close.
Right.
For three brothers.
Yeah.
Okay. That reminds me of some brothers that I grew up with who are still very best friends of mine. Their ages are very close, too. Okay. And how would you say you and Doug and your other brother got along? Were you like the stereotypical big brother, or what was the dynamics between the three of you?
We got along very well. I mean, obviously, brothers. I would say that I was more the stereotypical big brother because I always took up for them and would take the blame for things that they had done so that they wouldn't get in trouble.
Okay.
But we got along very well. Doug and I were extremely close.
Okay, great. And your parents, where did you all live? Where did you grow up?
We lived in Malden, South Carolina. Moved there when I was like 4 years old, and parents stayed there until they both passed. So we grew up in the same house in Malden, South Carolina.
Okay. All right. So you have your parents, you have 3 brothers, you being the oldest, and Doug being in the middle. Okay. Well, let's move to Doug in particular. You had told me that one of the things that sticks out to me about Doug was that he was a very good athlete. Why don't we just start right there concerning him? What sports and what did he do? Did he get some awards, or how good was he?
He played football, basketball, and baseball. He was a naturally gifted athlete. He's just gifted. It was easy for him. I remember when he was younger, before he got in high school, he played on a championship baseball team that they played in the national championship. They didn't win it, but they actually played in it. But then when he got to high school, he started playing varsity football as a sophomore. And again, he was just very talented. I remember that Doug actually never really played quarterback, and their quarterback got hurt in one of the games, and Doug went in to play quarterback and ran a 99-yard touchdown as quarterback and held that record for years and years and years. It recently, in the last, maybe the last 5 years, has been broken. Someone actually ran 100 yards at the school. But so I mean, he was just talented. He could play any position, whether it be football or baseball. But he concentrated mostly on football, and that's where most of his energy went into was football. Okay.
Did he get some awards? Now, did you tell me though that then later, maybe as a senior, he dropped off the football team or something? Did that happen, or?
His junior year.
Okay.
Yeah, he did. Basically, he got kicked off of the football team the spring of his junior year.
Wow.
And that sort of started this whole process.
It sort of started this downward slide that he got onto.
Right.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that then. Okay, so playing football, you said he played quarterback. What was his number one position, though?
He played several different positions. It just depended upon what the team needed. He played receiver. That was his main position. That's what he excelled at probably most. And then he played, I can't remember if it was a linebacker or defensive end, but I think he was a linebacker that he also played. Okay.
Well, that's usually where coaches put the most physically gifted athletes. That's for sure.
Right.
At the skill positions, and linebacker, defensive ends are usually considered to be some of the most athletic, of course, on the defense. Okay, that makes sense. How about his personality? And once again, we'll talk about this, this downward slide that he eventually got on. But how would you explain his personality maybe before this downward slide started, maybe in junior high school into early high school? His personality is, was outgoing, extroverted, introverted?
Oh, he was very gregarious. He was extroverted, easygoing. He liked to have fun. He was very well liked. Very popular. Treated people well. I mean, he didn't let his abilities go to his head and become conceited.
Okay. All right, so he was a popular guy. I guess that might make sense, given that he was a star athlete. That's usually how it works in high school. Maybe not surprised by that, but sounds like he was somewhat modest as well. How did he do in school as far as his classes?
He did okay. I mean, he wasn't an honor roll student. Of course, he didn't put much effort into it either. To be honest, in those days, a lot of us that played sports, not everyone, but a lot of us that played sports just did enough to make the grades to stay on the team. And
right.
So I mean, he was an average to average plus student. With no effort.
Okay. Now you stated already that in the spring of his junior year, he got kicked off the football team, and this kind of started this downward slide. What do you think brought that on, the way you look back at it now? And of course, you were his older brother, just a couple years older than him. Maybe saw this firsthand. What can you say about that?
I can say firsthand because I know exactly what happened.
Okay.
And I confirmed it with the people that were involved. So this is not hearsay. Okay. Doug, a guy was paid to give Doug a hit of speed laced with PCP. Doug did not know that speed was laced with PCP. And when Doug took that hit of speed, it messed him up. It messed him up bad. He just went off of the rails when he took it. To make the story short, basically because of that, that's what happened when causing him to get kicked off the football team. Okay, well, let me ask you some more questions then. Was this like some practical joke, or was somebody genuinely trying to hurt him? Did Doug realize that he had genuinely trying to hurt him? For what reason? Yes. It involved the football team and the coach having Doug play another position that Doug had not normally played. And so the person got replaced, wanted revenge, wanted to hurt it. Wow. Okay, and so he put this PCP in something that Doug was drinking, and then he had this happen to him. Did Doug realize right away that somebody had drugged him up? Was there any revenge taken or anything? What was the fallout, the immediate fallout between him and these other players or coach? What was the immediate fallout? Basically, they all abandoned Doug at that point. The coach was under pressure from the person's dad, and because he was an influential person, and he had the team vote whether to keep Doug on the team or not, and 3 people voted not to keep Doug on the team. The rest of the team voted to keep him on the team, and those 3 people that voted to keep Doug on the team, basically one of them has been in and out of prison since high school, and another one has passed away, and I'm not sure about the third one. So, I mean, they weren't the most stellar citizens anyway, and the coach kicked Doug off the team, and all of his friends abandoned him, and Doug just went downhill from there. His whole life was destroyed at that point from what, what he had known. Was it how soon after this happened did everybody find out that he had been drugged? I mean, I have to say once again, I didn't know him, and we just have talked on the phone and everything, but that seems the people would abandon him even though Doug was the one who was the victim is something that sounds a little strange to me. I'm not saying you're lying. I'm going to say that's totally the truth. I'm just trying to understand it. How would you explain it? Immaturity, not knowing what to do. I mean, Doug was, when he took that hit of speed, he did have a lot of behavior issues. That hit of speed that was laced with PCP, he did have a lot of behavior issues. I mean, it literally caused him to lose it, to go off the rails. He got suspended from school. He would show back up at school. The principal would call, and I'd have to go. And I'd already graduated at this point in time, but I was still, in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to go and get Doug, because she'd say, if you don't get him off the campus, I'm going to have him arrested. And so I would go get Doug and, get him off of the campus. And he was almost like, I don't know how to say this. He was out of control. Let's just put it that way. He was out of control. And all of his friends, except for one person, there's one person that never abandoned Doug. And but all the rest of them, all of his football buddies, everyone he went to school with, everybody pretty much abandoned him. Maybe not all at the exact same time, but over that period of time, he ended up transferring and going to another school his senior year.
Okay. And did he still have the same kind of behavior problems there?
No, actually he didn't.
Okay.
But then he ended up dropping out of school, and the behavior problems started coming back because he started doing drugs again.
Okay.
And there were other issues. All
right. Did you personally, as his bigger brother, you said you were very close to him, did you try to talk some sense to him? And if you tried to do that, what would he say?
Well, when someone's in that state of mind, you can't talk to them. They can't rationalize. They can't process normally. So what we just tried to do is just keep him from hurting himself, else not intentionally, just as an accident. And it took a long time. And finally, Mom and Dad, and I'll just go ahead and put this out there, Mom and Dad finally got him to the right type of position, actually got him to see a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist diagnosed him as having a bipolar disorder, and said that was likely as the chemicals in his brain were changed by that PCP.
Wow. Okay. Do you think that was the first time that Doug had ever done a drug like that? And are you saying that caused him then to become an addict of some type, or how would you explain it?
That was not the first time that Doug had ever done any type of drug. Back in the 70s, I mean, a lot of people smoked, some pot, and some people took a hit of speed or whatever. So it was not the first time. It was the first time that he had done anything like PCP, but he was unaware that he was doing PCP also. Okay. So that was just a vengeance, or revenge on someone had planned.
And your parents, how did they handle this? The way you remember it now, how did they handle their son, being star football player, etc., to being an outcast? Did they did they think about any legal repercussions against? I mean, that sounds like pretty serious business, slipping somebody something like that. Was that not considered?
My parents were very down to earth, extremely devoted Christians. The legal action never was a factor that they considered. It was just something that happened, and they were more concerned about their son and his health and his livelihood than they were legal action and getting revenge against whoever it is. They were aware of it because I told them. And like I said, I knew for a fact because the person that was paid to give Doug the hit of speed laced with PCP told me that that's what had happened and told me who paid him to do it.
Wow. Okay. All right, so this happened to him, started this downward spiral, kicked off the football team, went to a different school, finished out. Did you say he either graduated from high school or he dropped out of high school too?
Started at high school too, and then eventually got his GED.
Okay. All right, and you said that he was diagnosed with this bipolar condition. Of course, that condition has come up many times on Unfound over the last 4 years. And at least early on, how would you say Doug was in, taking his medication and managing it?
Not compliant early on.
No.
As with many bipolar
Sure.
disorder diagnosed individuals, they don't need medication and they don't take it, and then they have issues. And Doug was not different. I mean, he's a classic bipolar diagnosed individual, thinking that he did not need his medication and wouldn't take it and would have issues. We could tell very early on, within a day or two at the latest, if Doug was not taking his medication, because it changed. I mean, if he was on his medication, he was Doug. If he was not taking his medication, he changed into that out-of-control person again.
Well, what would be an example of that out-of-control person, being that probably very few people, maybe some of your family is now listening to this interview when it's playing on September 24th, but for those people who did not know him, what would be an example of how he would act not on his medication?
He'd be extremely hyper. He'd be very aggressive. He would actually be delusional. I mean, I remember one instance where he had been okay for a long time, had been working, had been saving his money, had been doing really well. He went off his medication, and he was, and Mom and Dad took all of his money and left, just, late one evening. And he was found, actually my uncle found him in a bar with all of his money, buying everybody drinks, being pretty aggressive and rowdy. And, so that was normal for him to be hyper aggressive and delusional.
Okay. All right, and we'll come back to that. But he did, after he got out of college, he got his out of high school, he got his GED. What kind of work did he have? What did he get into? And was he able to hold jobs, given that sometimes he didn't take his medication?
When he wasn't taking his medication, no, he wasn't able to hold a job or function that well socially. He did okay with some people and sometimes, but he would get in trouble. He would do things and get in trouble, and when I say get in trouble, normally the police will be involved, and there would be eventually. I mean, and he worked several different places. I mean, he worked at the grocery store in the meat department. He worked at Burger King. I mean, a lot of those type of jobs. Eventually, he did get a job with a plumbing company. And that's what he ended up settling down and doing. He became he got his journeyman's license with them, and then he went independent and he got his master's plumber's license.
Okay.
And for years he had been, his bipolar disorder had been managed and controlled because he was consistently taking his medication, and he was fine for years.
Okay. Do you think that was just maybe a sign of him finally realizing that he couldn't take his medicine, or was somebody on him, or was that sign of a maturity, or a combination of everything? What do you think that he finally
I would think it'd be a common all of it, because he had gotten married by that point. He'd met someone and gotten married. His daughter was only 3 years old when he went missing, and it had been managed, for a long time. But I think it's a combination of all of it, that one, he'd grown up and matured some, realized that he needed to take it. My parents honestly monitored him and monitored his medication. So they were very aware of, the pill count. And then his wife also, was, I'm sure, had something to do with him taking his medication consistently.
Did you, once he maybe started taking his medication more regularly and was avoiding those, ups and downs, did you and he ever have a conversation about, the state of his bipolar condition? And did he ever recognize, man, I got to keep taking this medicine, or else? Did you ever have any, in-depth conversations with him about it?
We did. And, all along from the time that he was diagnosed until, he disappeared, it was not a subject that we did not broach. If he ever brought it up, of course, then every now and then I would ask him, hey, how you doing? You still on your medication? Because, we could tell. Literally within 1 or 2 days, we could tell if he wasn't. And I'm like, I know that you don't think that you need it, but look how good you're doing when you take it. Look what happens when you don't. Just sort of reminded him, and we just talk about it. But yes, we had in-depth conversations.
Okay. And so he acknowledged that this is something that he needed to continue to do if he wanted to, of course, be a good husband, good father, good worker, etc. He knew he had an issue that was going to be something for the rest of his life.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so he became a plumber, and then, like you said, eventually he started working on his own. What year would you say, just a guess, the best you can do, how long would you say he was a plumber just working for himself? Of course, he disappeared in 1997, but just working for himself, what year do you think that started?
Looking back, I'm not sure, but I'm thinking probably 5 to 7 years.
All right, so maybe back to 1990, possibly.
Approximately, yeah. I think he went to work for that plumbing company around 84, 85, and then he went independent around, my best guess is around 1990.
Okay. And how was that business? How did he do in it? I'm guessing it's maybe a fairly competitive business, and being that maybe that area of where he was living, South Carolina, I don't know how many people need plumbers. It's not like New York City, I guess. But how was he doing with it?
At work, it was a struggle because he worked by himself for the most of the time. My dad would help him on some jobs if he needed help. I had an uncle that would help him. If he needed help, but most of the time it was him. It was sort of hard to, earn the level of income that he needed. So there was always, not always, but it wasn't common for there to be, some financial struggle or financial strain. Plus, I personally don't think he was pricing, and he and I talked about this. I don't think he was pricing his jobs the way that they needed to be priced. I think he was pricing them he wasn't an estimator. He's a plumber.
Yeah.
He was a business person. He's a plumber.
Yeah, he was a little bit on the cheaper side when he should have probably upped it up. He wasn't considering the expenses and everything else in the final cost.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Not to...
Please.
A conversation with the person, the family, the husband and wife, that the last house that he roughed in right before he disappeared. Mm-hmm. And, they had glowing reviews of Doug, said that all was phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Said that the husband said that he's one of the most honest people he's ever met. Basically, that when Doug had finished roughing in the job, the gentleman paid Doug, and Doug looked at the check and said, this isn't right. And he said, no, that's what we agreed upon. And he said, no, well, the amount's what we agreed upon, but that was for the setting of your fixtures. He said, I haven't set your fixtures yet. So he said, you need to pay me $300 less, and then when I set your fixtures, then pay the rest of the $300. Mm-hmm. And, the gentleman said, I've never had a contractor tell me I've overpaid him. Huh. So he said Doug was the top 2 or 3 contractors, that impressed him ever.
Wow. Okay.
And that was Doug. That was just typical.
That was just him.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned his wife a couple times. I think that she's going to play a prominent part in the rest of this discussion, but her name is Jo Ellen. And how did they meet? When did they meet? How long were they married? Of course, they had a couple children. Why don't we just get into all of that? How did Joe Ellen and Doug meet? Do you even know?
Well, they were in high school together. Doug was a couple of years older than her. I don't know if he actually knew her in high school or just maybe knew of her. But they officially met and started dating when they both worked at Burger King around 1984, 85.
Okay. And what year did they get married?
I think I know it was June. I think it was 86, June of 86 that they got married.
Okay. So they would have been married just a little over 11 years when he disappeared.
Right.
Okay. Once again, this is just going to be your opinion. First of all, maybe I should ask you this. What were you doing at the time? Were you seeing Doug often? Were you talking to Doug often? Let's just say late 80s. We don't necessarily have to get into what you were personally doing with your life, but how often were you talking to him? And did he ever give you an impression on, how the marriage was going and, becoming a father, et cetera?
The late 80s to the early 90s, we talked a lot because I had moved back. I'd been in the military, and I'd gotten out, and I moved back to Malden, Greenville area, Simpsonville area. And so we talked and saw each other a lot. In 93, I moved accepted another job and moved to Atlanta. And we didn't see each other talk as much then. Obviously, we still saw each other and we still talked and, family functions and, I'd still go home, frequently. And so we still talk, just not as much as from the.
Okay. And when you two would talk, of course, this is well before he disappeared, what would he say? What was your opinion of their marriage? Did he talk about being married? Was he happily married? How was the relationship? Once again, what he said to you, not what you heard from other people, but just you and him talking.
That he did tell me that she was physically abusive, emotionally and verbally abusive, extremely jealous, and we saw firsthand, all of it except for the physical abuse. But we saw the emotional, verbal, and the extreme firsthand. But he never ever said that he wanted a divorce. He never once told me that he wanted a divorce.
Never came up.
Never said that he wanted one.
Okay. And when you say you saw it firsthand, are you talking like family functions, like a holiday or a family reunion, something like that? Is that what you mean by seeing it firsthand?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. So you got to see their interaction, and you thought that Joe Allen's behavior was exactly the way that Doug was portraying it to you when you would talk to him?
Yes, except for the physical.
Okay. Except for the physical part. Okay.
Right.
All right, but he never talked about divorce, just brothers talking, and you at least saw some evidence that he was telling the truth, and it seems like, of course, there would have been other people who also saw it as well. Now, they did have 2 children. The listeners should know that I've gotten to talk to his Doug's older daughter, but at this time I can't go on the record with anything that she says. I hope to talk to her again before this interview comes out. But when were there, I know that their children were very young when he disappeared. I think that they were only, 3 years old and 4 months old, something like that?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay, and how was Doug excited about being a new father?
Extremely excited about being a father. He loved his children immensely. He was just a proud, happy dad.
Okay. But we do have to talk about this, and of course, being that this is a disappearance program, and Doug is still missing here, and we're doing this interview on September 16th, 2020. But admittedly, he did take off once.
He did.
And please explain when that happened and what he said about it and why it happened, please.
Okay. He did leave his wife one time, was gone 3 days, and her statement to the police when they interviewed her after Doug disappeared, she even states that he had left one time and was gone over the weekend and came home. Basically, he had gone to Charlotte, North Carolina, and in one day he had a job, he had an apartment with a roommate, and on the third day he came home because he said that he missed his daughter and he could not take being away from her. No matter how his relationship was, he wasn't going to be away from his daughter.
Wow. So this, what year did you say this happened approximately? His daughter was already born?
Yeah, his daughter was born. She was young, so I'm thinking probably late summer, early fall of '94.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure date, and I asked
that
exact date, but that's approximately when it was.
All right, that's fine. And so you talked to him about it afterwards. I must ask once again, I know that you were not keeping 24/7 tabs on him. Nobody was except maybe his wife. But did your family not know that he had gone away until he came back?
No, they knew. She called my mom and dad either that day or that evening, and said that, Doug had not come home. Of course, he didn't tell her that he was leaving her. And, he had taken his truck, he had taken all of his tools, because that was his means of earning a living, and had gone to Charlotte. And then, like I said, on the third day, he came home.
Okay.
And that was the only time that ever happened. Regardless, there's been statements said otherwise, and that's not accurate.
Okay. How would you say, once again, if this happened in 1994, it's still like 3 years before he disappeared, would you say that his marriage got any better? Once again, what you personally observed after he came back?
No, it didn't get any better.
No.
From what I observed, and from what he told me.
Okay, that's all we can go by. All right, so things kind of just continued, but he was committed to his family, his daughter, of course, eventually his other child that was born, being a plumber, and this was the situation that he was in when he disappeared in late July of 1997. This is what was going on. Okay.
Well, let me back up a little bit if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
When he came back from Charlotte, he and I went to Mom and Dad's. He was over there, so I went to Mom and Dad's, and he and I went outside and had a conversation in the front yard. And again, Doug and I were extremely close. Growing up, we had the same friends, played on the same sports teams. So we were extremely close. And I told him that you're struggling in your marriage. I understand the fact that you're not happy. I will support you, whatever you decide to do, whether you decide to stay, I'll support you. Whether you decide to get a divorce, I'll support you. But here's what you're not going to do. You're not going to leave again. And you need to make a decision. And you can do one or the other, but not leave. I said, but if you do ever decide to leave again, you're going to tell me you're going. And I will let Mom and Dad know that you're safe. I won't tell them where you're at if you don't want me to. I'll let them know that you're safe, and I won't tell anybody where you're at, but I'll just tell them that you're safe. Because you're not going to put Mom and Dad through what you put them through the last 3 days.
Right.
I agreed to that. And Doug and I it's kind of like the brother pack. When we had a pack, it held.
Okay. All right. So these are the things that were going on, and you believe that that time that he disappeared and came back, you believe that that was the last time he would ever voluntarily leave his family.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just some overall questions that I will ask you now before we get into that day of July 30th, 1997. You look back at it now, was there anything that you would say that, once again, you knew about that you look back now and say, you know what, that should have been a warning sign? Anything unusual that maybe you didn't recognize at the time, but now 23 years later, or maybe just a year later, you might have recognized? Anything that really sticks out to you before he disappeared?
No, honestly, no. He was happy. Overall, he loved his kids. He, spent time with them, took care of them. nothing really had changed with his marriage that I knew of one way or the other. He was handling, his bipolar disorder okay. He was consistently on his medicine, had been controlled and managed for years. So no, there wasn't any red flags.
Okay.
For a long time.
Okay, great. So I guess what you're saying, Hal, is that the 90s, at least for his mentality, it sounds maybe some marriage issues, etc. But as far as him managing his own mentality, his medicine, etc., was a lot different in the 90s than it was in the 80s.
It was extremely different in the 90s than in the 80s. It was a struggle at times. Anytime that you have a mental health issue, it's always present. You just have to learn to manage it. And in the 90s, he just learned and accepted the fact that he had it and had to manage it. So his behavior was very different in the late 80s to early, in the 90s than it was in the late 70s to the mid 80s.
Okay, that's good to hear. All right. Now maybe I should ask you this: he was a plumber. Did Jo Ellen work?
She did work different jobs. Sometimes it was full-time, sometimes it was part-time, but she did, for the most part, work.
Okay. And they still, though, had to seem to have a money crunch.
They did still have some money issues. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, I'm not sure why, because they didn't really spend extravagantly. They did buy a house. I think in 91, they bought a house, and it wasn't an extravagant house. It was just a nice, small 3-bedroom house, probably 1,500 square feet. Doug's truck wasn't new. Her car wasn't new. But it was not uncommon, for singles.
Okay. All right. So he has that going on. So she did work. And so we move up to this day of July 30th, 1997. Of course, you found out these things after the fact, but what do you know about Doug's work schedule for that day?
Okay. I know that he left for work at 7 o'clock that morning. And that's the last time that his wife said that she had seen him that day. I do know that he did a couple other jobs that day that we confirmed that they were done. I do know that earlier that afternoon he cashed a check for $1,500 for a job that he had finished.
Okay.
I do know that a friend of the family saw him at either Home Depot or Lowe's, I don't remember which one it was, buying plumbing supplies parts, and then he was also went to the company that he used to work for as a plumber that he started with. They had a supply store. So he went in there at 4:55 on the day he disappeared and talked to one of the co-owners and had a conversation with her, and she said that Doug was fine, was happy, was excited about going to Disney World the next day. That he was rational, he was fine. The person that saw him at Home Depot or Lowe's said the same thing. Said he was fine, he was rational. He was typical Doug. There was no issues. He wasn't acting weird. So he bought that last plumbing part. I think it was like a $6 part. And she was the last person, Doug, before he disappeared. He was supposed to go and do another job that evening, and he did not show up for that job.
Okay, if I could just ask, he stopped at Lowe's or Home Depot to get these parts. What was the reason that he stopped in at his old job? Was there any particular? Just stopped in to say hi, or was it business related? Do you know why he even stopped in there?
He bought another part there. I'm assuming they didn't have it at Home Depot or Lowe's what he needed, or either he forgot and that was close to on the way home and then on the way to that other job also. So,
do you happen to know where this other job he was supposed to go to that evening? Was it a business? Was it a private residence? Do you know what it was?
Yes, I do. It was a church.
It was a church.
He was going to install a water fountain.
In a church. Okay. Do you know what church that is in case I want to do a map regarding this? Is that church still there? Do you know what church it was?
I don't know the name of the church. It is still there. It's been several different churches. I can give you the location. I can't tell you a street number, but I can tell you where it's located. Please do right now, if you know it off the top of your head. If not, we can talk. Where is it? It is on Bethel Road, and it is on the corner of, and I don't know the name of this other road, but the other road is where Bethel Elementary School is located. Okay. So it's right in that corner of Bethel Road, and you turn to go to Bethel Elementary. So the back of the church backs up to Bethel Elementary School. In Simpsonville? Yes, it is a Simpsonville address. Simpsonville address. And this Lowe's or Home Depot or this place that he went to his old job, are they also in Simpsonville somewhere? That part I don't know. I don't know if it's Simpsonville or Greenville. Okay. All right, because I may end up doing a map just explaining some of these locations. In fact, I know I'll probably do it given, his truck and everything else. So I would like to include that. The last place that he went to buy the plumbing supplies of the place that he worked, was in Malden, South Carolina. It's not there anymore. The owners have passed away. Okay, so is it Malden, M-A-L-D-E-N? M-A-U-L-D-I-N. D-I-N. All right. Yeah. That will help me. It was on Butler Avenue, Butler Street, Butler Road in Malden. Okay, that'll certainly help me. Okay. So this is where he was. People have saw him, people who knew him because of the business that they were all in. It sounds to me like he was a frequent customer. They knew him, and it seems these people were tracked down after he disappeared. But he did have this job that was supposed to be at this church, and he never showed up. Correct. Okay. Do you know if, I don't know if it would be the priest, the reverend, the pastor, or whoever takes care of the church, managing the grounds or everything, did they ever try to call him or call his house when he didn't show up for that job? Do you know? No, my parents contacted the church to see if he had shown up. Okay, after he went missing, they called. Correct. If he showed up, and that's how you found out that he didn't show up. Correct. All right, so to your knowledge, they never. This is just an example for everybody. He was supposed to show up there at 7 p.m. in the evening. He doesn't show up 7:30. They start. Of course, he had a beeper, which we'll get into. There's no information as to whether they tried to beep him or anything else. Correct. All right. They may have. We just don't know all these years later. Okay. Exactly. All right. And you also said that he cashed this check for $1,500. This was for a job. It must have been a fairly big job that he had done in the preceding days. Correct. Okay. And that person or company verified that check was deposited by him. Looked like his signature on the check? The bank did. The bank did. Okay. All right. So he doesn't show up. And when is the first indicator that Doug, I'll just use this word, Doug may be missing? What was the first indicator maybe that your family found out, his wife or you, whoever you want to mention first? What was the first indicator? His wife called my mom and dad at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm not sure what time. It was early in the morning, and to tell them that Doug had not come home. Huh. And then she called my uncle and aunt at 6 o'clock in the morning, hysterical. They couldn't understand what she was saying. They had to calm her down. Mm-hmm. Understand it. But she called them at like 6 o'clock in the morning and told them that Doug had not come home. That would have been the morning of the 31st. The morning of the 31st of 1997, she calls your parents very, very early in the morning saying Doug never came home from the time that he was working.
the day before. And how did your parents call you? How did you find out about all of this?
My parents called me, yes.
Okay, right away, would you say?
That morning, yeah.
Okay, very, very quickly. Did any of you live in the Simpsonville area at the time?
Obviously my parents did, but I did not, and our other brother did not.
Did not, okay. All right, so he's missing, but this is probably, we're going to move into an area that I think that the listeners are going to find, it's probably one of the bizarre points that we've ever talked about on a program concerning a disappearance, but you've already mentioned this Disney trip that Doug and his family were supposed to go on, leaving on July 31st, this very morning, in which his wife is calling your parents saying, hey, Doug, I can't reach him on his beeper, he didn't come home, etc. Let's talk about this Disney trip, once again, as best as you understand it. First of all, do you even have my impression living here in Florida is people, families usually plan well in advance that they are going on a Disney World trip to Orlando, Florida. Do you believe that was the situation with Doug and his family?
I do. I've talked with my aunts that live in Greenville, and I've always lived there, all in Simpsonville area, and they said that it was planned for at least 2 to 3 months prior to them going, at least. Okay,
so pretty typical. My sister's going to be coming down here to Orlando here in October, and I think she has a timeshare there. She's had a plan for like 6 months, so that certainly makes sense. Did everyone in your family know that they were going? Did you know? Did your parents know? Everybody knew that they were going?
Everybody knew. All the family knew. Everyone that Doug came in contact knew because he was excited to take his daughter to Disney World.
Okay. And was this going to be, once again, your understanding, was this supposed to be your stereotypical, I guess, week-long vacation, or just 3 days, or week-long? Anybody know how long it was supposed to be?
It was supposed to be, from what they said, a Thursday through a Sunday or Thursday through Monday. They're not sure if they were supposed to come back Sunday or Monday. So basically 4 days.
4 days. Okay, so it was not a week.
5 days.
All right, so it was Thursday, not Thursday like a week and 3 days. It was just 3 or 4 days. Okay.
Right.
And, of course, Doug had his truck, and I guess Joellen had her own car. To your knowledge, what car were they going to be taking on this trip?
Originally, they were going to take my mom and dad's car because obviously Doug's truck was just a small, like a Chevrolet S10 pickup, a little small one, so they wouldn't have taken that. And then her car was not as reliable as what they thought it needed to be going to Florida, so mom and dad were going to let them borrow their car to go. Okay.
So this was the plan. But the thing is, though, unlike people, I think a lot of people gone on road trips, not necessarily it has to be to Disney World, but when you go on a road trip, usually people start packing up their car maybe a day or two before, but this was not the situation because they did not have your parents' car yet.
That's correct. They did not have it yet.
Okay. So we go to, once again, Doug is seen on July 30th. They're supposed to go on this trip on July 31st. Early that morning, Joellen calls your parents saying he didn't come home. She ends up calling other family members and people in your family, claiming that he didn't come home. But she goes on the vacation anyway, correct?
Yes, she went anyway.
She went anyway on the morning or the afternoon of July 31st, 1997.
Yes, I'm not sure the time that she left, but she did file a missing persons report that was dated 31 at, I think it was like 8:55.
In the morning?
The time that was completed. Yes.
A.M.
It was completed at 8:55 a.m.
In the morning, okay. She went on the vacation anyway. You're going to have to surely explain this to listeners. How did she end up going? Her husband's missing. She goes anyway. Did she end up taking your parents' car? What went on there? And who instead went with her?
She did not take my parents' car. My parents said that if Doug was needed, if they needed to go pick Doug up somewhere, or that they could continue looking for Doug, or they had a couple of vehicles, but one of them was just not as reliable as their newer car.
Mm-hmm.
So they felt like they needed to keep their car just in case. So my parents rented her a car to go to Disney World. She called a friend of hers and asked her if she wanted to go with her, and her friend and her friend's young son went with them. Now, the only child that Doug's wife took was the 3-year-old. The 4-month-old, my mom and dad kept him, and that was the plan. That was the plan all along.
All right, so it's just going to be Doug, Joellen, and their daughter, who was 3 years old, going, not the 4-year-old.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
But instead, and it was going to be in your parents' car. Instead, it ended up being Joellen, their daughter, and then this friend of Joellen's and her son, and they took a rented car that your parents paid for.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And and Doug, all of you would probably realize that Hal and I have gone round and round about that, and about this particular aspect of it. It's once again, we don't make any decisions here, conjecture, theories, but these are just the facts, correct? Those are just the facts.
Exactly. The facts.
Okay. And so I have to ask this: between yourself and your parents and your other brother, what was your opinion about her going to Disney even though Doug was missing?
It was, and still is, very bizarre, very irrational behavior. It is very suspicious behavior, and that was consistent between family and
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and
I have to ask you this, though.
Okay, go ahead.
I have to ask you this, though, because, once again, I just have to ask these questions. Your parents, of course, were very suspicious about all of this, but they decided to pay for a car for her to go anyway. And of course, we've talked about this before. I'm not here. I know your parents are deceased now. I'm not, but can you maybe explain that in a way to the listeners?
Yes. My parents, my parents were very confrontational adverse. They did not like confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
They did not want to deal with her volatility and the reaction that they would get if they told her no. Mm-hmm. She was asked by an uncle, why is she going to Disney World when her husband is missing? And she told the uncle that she did not want to disappoint their 3-year-old daughter. Okay.
And I have to ask, being that Doug had gone away for 3 days before, is it possible that Joellen was also thinking about that she just wasn't going to let him maybe running away again get in the way of a vacation? Is that possible?
Anything's possible. I don't know her mindset. I don't know what she was thinking at that point in time.
Okay.
So anything's possible.
Okay. So this is what happened that morning. So Doug's still missing. Your parents find her a rental car or a rental van, whatever it was, and her and her friend and their kids, excluding one, the 4-month-old, all go to Disney for those days that Doug and Joellen and their daughter were supposed to go. So they get the car. They're driving to Florida. Of course, they're just in South Carolina. It's not a long drive. And Doug's still missing. While they're gone, what do you and what do your parents do in relation to figuring out what happened to Doug?
Well, basically, Mom and Dad just drove around looking for Doug, different places that they thought that he had a truck, looking for things. But then his truck was found. There's some conflicting information whether it was found on the 31st or it was found on the 1st. Mm-hmm. When I talked with the lady that reported it,
okay.
And she said that she reported it right away the morning that she saw it. But then again, she couldn't remember was it the 31st or the 1st, but the first morning.
Okay, so
But
we're not sure if it was the 31st or the 1st.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I can't concretely say, and I do not have the report where the vehicle was towed. The South Carolina, at the time, it was called Highway Patrol, but now it's state troopers.
Okay.
But at the time, the Highway Patrol, it was in their jurisdiction because it was outside of Simpsonville city limits, so they had Doug's truck towed.
Okay. So what you're saying is that unless it was very early on the morning of the 31st that his truck was found, it's very possible that the truck was found while Joe Ellen and company were already in Florida at Disney. It's possible.
That's possible.
Okay. All right. So the truck is found, and we'll talk about it here in a bit, of course. But while she is gone, does she ever call back to South Carolina to figure out or find out what's going on and trying to figure out what happened to Doug? She called once.
I'm not sure, and I asked my aunt, and they were not aware. They said as far as that they know, she did not, but maybe Mom and Dad just didn't tell them that she had called to check.
All right, so there's no proof she called.
Correct, but there's no proof that she didn't.
Okay, of course.
Both sides.
Okay. When she gets back, 3 or 4 days later, does she take part? And we'll go back to the truck and everything. We're kind of getting ahead, but I just want to ask, when she gets back, would you say that she is energetic in trying to figure out what happened to Doug, being that he's still missing 4 days later?
Yes, she was energetic, trying to figure out what happened to Doug at that point in time.
All right. Okay. So maybe her attitude changed. Maybe she thought that he was going to be gone for a day or two like he was before. Of course, then 4 days later, he's still missing. Did you personally talk to her in those few days after she got back? Did your parents talk to her? Did she say anything about Doug's demeanor? Anything like that?
I did not talk to her. I'm sure she did. And according to the missing persons report that was filed on the 31st, she said that they, were not having any marital problems. They had not had an argument. That they had some, financial stress. And no money been taken out of their bank. That was abnormal. Nothing was abnormal. And she even said in her police report that Doug did leave her one time before for 3 days over the weekend and came home. Okay. So, according to the missing persons report, no, there was nothing abnormal. There was no problems. According to her.
Okay. Did she offer any opinion on? Of course, by the time she gets back, she knows the truck's been found. But did she offer any opinion as to what could have happened to Doug? Did she ever offer any opinion?
The only thing that she's ever said that I have heard is that she thinks that Doug ran off. Doug abandoned her and the kids. That's her opinion.
Okay. When she gets back, do the police talk to her? And we'll talk about where the truck was found, etc. But did the police question her? Does she allow them to go onto her property? Anything like that, to your knowledge?
The only time that they talked with her that I have documented was on 8/8, and a detective spoke with her, and she just sort of gave her statement. She has never really submitted, according to the sheriff, she has never really submitted to a formal interview. She would never come in, and she has never allowed anyone on the property, even though I'm not sure that the sheriff's department has ever asked to go on the property either. Okay.
Did they ever give her a polygraph test? Did she resist to do one? Did she ever, did she ever, I guess what you would say, lawyer up? Anything like that in the last 23 years?
No, she has never done any of that, allowed any of that. Again, I don't know if the police have asked, but she's never done it. The sheriff did tell me that she has never submitted to an interview.
Okay. All right. So once again, Doug goes missing during some time later, in the early evening to later in the evening of July 30th. He does not show up at this church for this job to put this water fountain in. His wife the next morning, very early, maybe 3 or 4 at 5 a.m., calls your parents saying, hey, Doug never came home the night before. Don't know what happened to him. She calls your aunt and uncle saying the same thing. And then later that morning, she goes on this trip after your parents rent her a vehicle. She and her friend and children go, come back, and Doug's still missing. And, of course, this disappearance is still unsolved. So let's move on to this. You've already talked about Doug's truck was found, it sounds like, fairly quickly in disappearance terms. Where was it found? How was it found? Let's talk about that now, Hal.
Okay. His truck was found. Did you want me to name the road?
Yeah, please. Whatever you want to do. Yes, please. Be as accurate as you can. Sure.
Okay. All right. Truck was found on League, League Road in Simpsonville, about a mile and a half from his house. The front of the truck was in the direction like it was going to his house. Mm-hmm. It was in a creek, on a creek bed, up the bridge. It was so close to the bridge that when the tow truck was pulling it out, that somehow it split or cut one or two of the tires on the bridge columns.
Wow.
On the driver's side, and Dad, of course, after he got it out of the impound, replaced the tires.
Okay.
But it was found, like I said, on League Road. The name of the creek is called Horse Pen Creek. Mm-hmm. And the lady that found or reported this truck said that the first morning that she saw it, she's on the way to work. She actually lived in the same neighborhood as Doug and was on her way to work. And she went right by the Simpsonville Police Department and reported it.
Did she know at that point that Doug was missing, or was this just a coincidence that she noticed it?
Just coincidence.
Okay.
She couldn't even see the cab of the truck. She could only see the bed of the truck. Mm-hmm. And she said, obviously, it was strange for a truck to be there.
Yeah.
And so she just went immediately, because it was on her way, she went immediately to the sheriff's department, to the Simpsonville Police Department and reported it.
Did she know it was Doug's truck, or she just said, it's a truck?
It's a truck. She didn't know.
Okay.
She didn't know Doug. She didn't know he was missing. Even though they lived in the same neighborhood, she did not know him or his wife. And so she knew nothing. She just saw the truck, said it just looked strange. She was worried that someone was hurt in it, or hurt in the area.
Right. Okay.
Is what she told me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you did say, though, the truck was only found, I've mapped it out, I think on the road terms to drive from where Doug lived at the time to that spot, I think it said on Google 1.7 miles, but as the crow flies, if you were to go cross country, it's only like a mile. But if you, being you have to take the roads, it's 1.7 miles. So not far at all. And so it was nosed in, very close to the bridge. I've done a Google Street View on it, but it sounds like Doug or somebody was trying to hide it there, but we should be clear, it wasn't like it was a wreck. It was like somebody parked it there.
Correct. It wasn't. There was no damage. The truck was unlocked. Mm-hmm. There were no keys. When Dad got the truck out of the impound, he got it in his basement, and he and my uncle meticulously went through the truck, and all of his tools were there. They found the receipt from where he bought the plumbing part at 4:55 that afternoon. Mm-hmm. I asked my uncle if they found the part, and he goes, "No, we didn't even look for it." He said, "We didn't even think to look for the part." They found $300 in the glove box, which was Doug's emergency money. And, I mean, all of his tools and everything was there.
Okay, so what you're saying is they pulled it out, tow truck came, pulled it out, and how long was it before the truck got back into one of your family members' hands?
The best that I remember, he said 1 or 2 days. because the Highway Patrol went to their house, obviously, because that was where it was registered, and of course she wasn't home.
Right.
It was a couple of days or so before she found out. On the person report on the 8th, she mentioned that some police jurisdiction, I forget exactly how she called it, some law enforcement agency had the vehicle towed. That was her statement.
Okay. So what you're giving, whatever that was, the police didn't have it very long. They towed it away. It might have been in the impound lot for a couple of days, but it was not in there very long.
Correct.
Okay. And what you're also saying, I guess, is that that the police didn't, it doesn't sound like they did any forensics on it, given that all of these things were still in the truck when your family got it back.
Right. They did absolutely no forensics on it.
Okay. So once again, to go through this again, we have to remember that Doug got this, cashed his checks for $1,500, but only $300 were found in the truck, and you personally don't believe that $300 had anything to do with the $1,500.
I personally do not. I personally think that was Doug's emergency money, because he always kept emergency money and would hide it. And I think that was his emergency money.
Okay. And his tools, of course, like wrenches and pipe fittings and things and drills and things, all of it was still there. Still all there. The receipt for the parts, but we're unclear if those parts that he bought were still in there, right? We're just not sure.
Correct.
They might have been there, but we're not sure. I don't know how important that is or not. Not sure. But what else was missing? Of course, Doug is missing. What else is missing? The $1,500.
The $1,500, his wallet, and his pager.
Okay. All right, and this is what is all discovered after the fact. And the truck was found while Joe Ellen and company were in Florida. Did you ever personally know, or anybody in your family know, of a time when maybe Doug would have gone over to that creek for any reason, maybe just to walk, to fish, anything like that?
No, never personally, no.
No. Okay. All right, so this truck doesn't sound like any forensics were done on it. What, being that your family ended up getting it back, what eventually did happen to the truck?
Eventually, Joellen sold it.
Okay, so she eventually got it back, being that I guess it was hers anyway.
Yeah, it was hers. Yeah, and of course, Dad gave her the $300 that was found in the truck, and she sold the truck. Okay.
Being that the truck was found there, what kind of searches were done in the area? Dogs, ATVs, how many people? What do you know about the searches that were done in the area trying to find Doug?
There were actually two searches that were done in the area. The first one was a group of men from the church, my mom and dad's church, got together and was going to search using ATVs and just walking. Yep. And the sheriff's department found out about it, so they actually joined in. They actually brought cadaver dogs or search dogs. I don't know if it's cadaver dogs or just search dogs. They brought those dogs out, and they actually had a helicopter in the air for a little while. Wow. Just did an aerial search while they were out there searching. So they searched, for a distance on the creek. Both sides of the creek, and all the land roughly around it. And when I say roughly, I mean, I don't know, probably, half a mile to a mile around. And then nothing was found. And then at a later date, a gentleman that one of my aunts worked with found out about it, and he was part of a group of people that they had search dogs. I don't know if they were cadaver dogs, but, search dogs / cadaver dogs. They went out there and basically did the same thing. So there were two searches of the area within about a 2-week time frame.
Would you say, and the listeners know, maybe you don't know this, Hal, but the listeners know I'm not the biggest believer in dogs. I think it's very hit and miss with them. But the way you remember it, did the dogs hit on anything at all?
Not according to my uncle was there for both times, and not according to my uncle.
Okay, so I guess the way that goes is they give something of Doug's to the dogs. The dogs know what to smell for, and the opinion is that the dogs just didn't pick up. And they were just walking around, not smelling anything.
Correct.
Okay. Of course, we have to remember, on the other hand, that if Doug did put the truck there, that the creek is there, and it is believed that if people walk in water to get away, then it's a hard time. It's hard for dogs to follow that. At least that's the way they portray it in movies sometimes. Maybe that's not as true in real life. I'm just not sure. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Okay. So, but what you're saying is, with the humans being out there, they didn't find anything of Doug's, anything, a stray piece of paper or any trash or anything else that could be connected to Doug.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody, during that time, I'm guessing that there were flyers being put out. Did anybody ever come forward to say, yeah, I saw a guy who looked like Doug walking League Road or anywhere near there during that time?
Not anywhere near there. There was a lady that told my uncle that she had seen Doug the day after he disappeared. She was a waitress at a Waffle House that Doug would frequent, and it was on. This was in Greenville, which was probably 10 miles away from where he lived, where his truck was found. And then she was questioned again, and she said she denied that she said that. She denied that she saw Doug. And so what we sort of took from that is that she probably had her days mixed up. That if she did see Doug, it was probably, obviously before, but it wasn't the day after.
Okay.
And then she has been, just a side note, she has since been contacted, and according to her daughter, she has Alzheimer's, so she doesn't remember anything.
All right.
And that was just within the last month that she's been contacted.
Okay. I know people are going to probably go, being that I'll be doing a video for this. You've already explained with League Road and Horsepen Creek, people will be going there. Would you call this an area that's populated, or are there a lot of houses around where the vehicle was found? How wooded is it? How would you explain it to people who haven't been there?
It is it's a populated area. There is a lot of open land and wooded land. That League Road is a street that has a lot of high-end homes that have a lot of land, associated with the property. One of the owners of the property, when Doug went missing, there's a pond near. There's several ponds on League Road, but there's a pond. The closest that was the one that was to Doug's truck. The lady was so worried about that she had her husband drain the pond to make sure that there wasn't a body in there.
Wow. Well, that was nice of them.
Yeah, it was very nice.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting to me, being that there was a populated area. I don't know how busy League Road is, but it is interesting to me that only one person, called that truck in.
Right.
It's just interesting. I think that's something we have to all remember for future disappearances, is that it's amazing how people will just drive by vehicles parked in suspicious locations and just keep driving, and it doesn't even affect them. And then there's luckily this one person. If she had not done this, who knows how long it would have taken for this truck to be discovered.
And then it could have been vandalized.
Yeah, sure. Now, I will say, though, being that you said that people, your family, your parents, maybe your aunt and uncle, they live in the area, they were driving around, do you know if they ever drove down League Road on July 31st, once again after Joe Allen and company went to Florida? Did they drive on that road? Do you even know? Being that they said they were driving around, did they ever go on League Road? Could they have missed that truck, or maybe it wasn't there? Do you even know?
I don't know.
Okay.
All of the above are full, but I do not know.
Okay. So because you said they were driving around, they might have been driving around maybe the city. Maybe they were driving even around maybe if anybody knew where his last job was supposed to be. Maybe they weren't driving around
Right.
his house at all. Maybe driving around a house, maybe it was the last place they would have thought to look. So, okay.
I got the impression that they were driving to his known places that he had done, or that he was been working, or that he was known to frequent.
Okay. Now, he did have this pager. The pager, to this day, 23 years later, is still missing. Any information on that you could glean at all? Could pagers be pinged back then? They work on the same technology as cell phones do. Do you know if the police back then did anything to try to track down the pager, where it was, where it might have last, bounced off a tower or something like that? Do you know?
Yeah, I do not know if the police did that or not. I filed a Freedom of Information Act in June with the Greenville County Sheriff's Department.
Okay.
Doug's file is over 600 pages long.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they sent me 43 pages. And out of those 43 pages, only 16 of those pages were actually investigative notes. The remainder of those pages were just forms to recertify that Doug was missing. So what happened to the other 500
pages?
57 pages.
Yeah, that is interesting, because I have to admit, that this does not sound like a disappearance that is 600 pages worth. That's no offense to your family or anything else, but once again, my experience, it's fairly straightforward disappearance. So hearing that there are 600 pages is a question mark in my mind as to what could be in those.
Right.
Okay.
Well, that's mine too. And the
Yeah.
Freedom of Information Act, like I said, they only sent 43 and only 16 were actual investigative notes.
Yeah. How do you know it's 600 pages?
The sheriff told me, and the investigator told me.
Okay. All right. So we have all.
And actually, the person in the Freedom of Information Office told me. She said over 500.
Okay. Well, that's
right.
After 500 pages. After 500 pages, I'm not sure if it matters if it's 500 or 600. That's still quite a bit.
Yeah. What's 100 more between friends?
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Al. That's what I was. It's 500 because 499 just aren't quite enough. Okay,
right.
Gotcha. All right, now this $1,500, it is missing. Maybe it could. Once again, we don't theorize, but you said that he cashed a check at a bank, and just to be clear, he did this before he went and got these additional parts to Home Depot and went to his prior job. Is that right?
I don't know if he did it before he went to Home or Lowe's or wherever he went. I would assume that he did, but I don't know that for a fact. But I do know for a fact it was before he went and got the last part at 4:55 that afternoon.
Okay. How did you find out about this $1,500?
My mom and dad told me about the job that he had done, and we contacted them, and they had told him, and I don't remember which one it was, but they had told him that they had paid him $1,500 that day.
Okay. And they verified at some point in the future that he did cash their check.
The bank did.
The bank, once again, the bank, yes, that's what
Yes.
The bank, but he would have had to have endorsed it on the back?
Correct.
All right. And do you think that check could be in evidence? Is there any way to make sure that it was he who got that money? Is it possible that somebody could have, this disappearance could be connected to that $1,500?
I doubt if there was or a chain of custody on it. Okay. I mean, I did the Freedom of Information Act, and I didn't get much.
Okay.
The investigator has told me that it was a poor investigation and not much done.
Right. Well, let's talk about that. Maybe we can.
I struggled with the Greenville County Sheriff's Department for.
Yeah. Well, before we go any further, let's talk about that.
I don't want to be critical of them, but.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to let you to be too critical of them either. But I just want to talk about. Their attitude. Of course, she filed this missing persons report before she went to Florida. They get it. They eventually, I guess the sheriff's office did take part in at least one of the searches that were done.
Correct.
Correct. What was the general attitude of the police department that is maybe still responsible for his disappearance? Has any police officer or detective ever offered you or your family a theory or anything else?
There's been a couple of different theories. One of them I'm not going to disclose.
Okay.
But we have been told that they think that Doug just left.
Mm-hmm.
And one or more of the investigators over the years has said that they think there's something different.
Something what?
Something different that had happened.
Something...
That he didn't just disappear. Yeah.
Okay.
That there was foul play involved.
Okay. Once again, we're not talking about our theories, Hal. We're talking
Correct.
about what they've told you is that they are open to the idea that this wasn't a situation where Doug just walked off, that somebody could have been involved in... investigators.
One investigator previously had told me that when all the other times it's basically we think that Doug has just,
walked
ran off. And the previous, or the sheriff that was sheriff for so long, in Greenville County basically said the same thing.
Okay.
That he just ran away.
Okay. How much work would you say how long was it before you think that the investigating department kind of just threw their arms up in the air and said, we don't know what happened?
For them saying they don't know what happened.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing, here they are, they get the report, they get a statement from Jo Ellen, maybe they even talk to her when she gets back. They talk to all of you. These searches are done, but when did you get the feeling that the police were stumped?
Very early on. Because they basically said that they feel like Doug had just run off.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so.
Please.
No, I'm just.
Okay.
That's basically their position.
Okay, and it didn't help, I guess, that Joanne told them that he had ran off before.
Correct. According to what I've been told, she had told them that he had run off several times.
Right.
Which again is not the case. Even her initial, he left her one time and was only gone for the weekend.
Okay. So the longer it went, it seems maybe she exaggerated a little bit?
It appears so.
Okay. All right.
From the facts that I know the facts, and from her missing person report, it appears so.
Okay. All right, let's talk about that first time. Maybe we can draw some compare and contrast between him leaving, I think you said in 1994, and then him disappearing in 1997. In your opinion, are there any similarities between these two incidents at all?
None whatsoever. The first time, it was planned, at least partially, because he took his truck, he took his tools. His method of making a living. This time he did not take his truck. He didn't take his tools, and obviously there was money in his truck. So it does not make sense that he would just run away and leave all of those things. If he was going to run away, he would have taken he would have taken all of that.
Right. He would have taken his truck. He would have taken his tools, and as you reminded, or as you stated earlier in this interview, that he seemed to have gotten set up pretty quickly in Charlotte and then had a change of heart.
Exactly.
Whereas in this situation, his truck's still in Simpsonville, his tools are still in Simpsonville, and it's hard to understand where he went.
It is hard to understand or what happened. The other thing is let's not forget his bipolar disorder. Right. That he would have had to be taking medication, and if he did not take, wasn't if It was an absolute.
Mm-hmm.
He would have issues, and he's listed in the missing. He was listed on the very first day in the missing persons database. His fingerprints are on file. He would have gotten in trouble. Something would have happened if he wasn't taking his medication for 23 years, and we would have found Doug.
Right. I think that's
None of that has occurred.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. How is that? Being that he left without his medication, at some point you'd think his name would have popped up somewhere if he tried to get a refill on his lithium, but of course we don't know if that's happened. Probably not. And it's the mere fact that he seems to have not popped up on any law enforcement database as being charged with anything is probably the best indicator that he didn't run off.
I wholeheartedly agree.
All right. You believe that if he, once again, not theorizing, but the way you understand your brother, his condition, everything else, it was almost impossible for him to stay out of trouble if he wasn't on his medication.
It wasn't almost. It was impossible
100,
for him to stay out of trouble.
100% certainty.
100%.
Okay.
No doubt whatsoever.
Okay. And is there any chance, once again, you maybe understand this affliction better than I do, being that you saw your brother suffer from it, is there any chance that something could have gone wrong with his mind between him being at these places, his former employer, and before you got to that church? Could something happen that quick or not? Your opinion as a layman.
With him or in general?
Well, just him. You said that you could very quickly tell if something was going on with him if he wasn't taking his medication. And what I'm trying to say is this something that would be, could happen within a couple hours between him being good Doug to being bad Doug, or did it take longer than that?
No, it usually took 24 to 48 hours.
Okay.
And his wife said, according to my aunt, because she talked to her, when she talked to her, she heard Doug that morning when he was leaving for work doing his medicine bottles, opening his medicine and taking his medicine. So she heard him that morning taking it.
Okay. And is this medicine that he took every day?
Yes.
He has to take it every day? Okay.
Yes.
And was any medication of any type found in his truck?
No.
No. Okay.
He had, his medication was still at his house, and he had a refill that Mom and Dad had gotten for him at their house that he hadn't picked up from them yet. Okay. But he still had some because she heard him taking it that morning.
Okay. All right, so he's missing. Joellen, what does she do with her life after Doug disappears? What does she do? Of course, she continues to raise their two children, but how does she carry on? Once again, the way you understand.
Financially, relationship-wise, I'm not sure.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, did she continue to put it out there that her husband was missing? Did she continue to, did she do any interviews for local newspapers or websites as we got into the 2000s, things like that?
She did do interviews. Of course, they did the flyers. They did a massive amount of flyers, her and my family, when she got back from Florida. She did do an interview then. She did do an interview later. I'm not sure of the time frame, but I remember that she did do another interview a few years later with the local news station. And I think she did try to contact, and of course we contacted all of the missing person shows, and basically never heard anything back, or they didn't pick it up. But she did at least one other time do an interview with a local news station. Okay.
Now, Joellen herself, from what I wrote down here, I guess 18 months later had another tragedy happen to her personally. Is that her brother?
Months.
Excuse me?
14 months.
14 months later, that her brother committed suicide.
Correct.
Okay. Do you know anything about that? Did you ever meet her brother? Did he have some problems on his own? What have you heard about that?
had any problems on
Yeah,
his own.
yeah. I mean, did you ever meet him at like a family get-together? Was he depressed or?
Yeah. Yeah, I met him. He seemed nice. He seemed rational. I know the fact that he was an Eagle Scout. He had been in the Navy.
Huh.
I mean, he seemed like a nice guy.
Okay.
So, I mean, I didn't know him extensively. From what the interaction that I saw, him and my brother got along well. There were never any issues. I never heard of any issues. Doug never said anything about, any issues with him.
Okay. And I have to ask, because this has come up, but I don't know how far I want to go into this. Did her brother leave a suicide note, to your knowledge?
I was told that he did leave a suicide note.
Okay.
I never saw it. That's only what I have been told.
Okay. Did you, anybody in your family, maybe not you, it doesn't sound like, but maybe somebody else in your family ever talk to Jo Ellen about her brother's suicide and about what that suicide note might have said?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Then I have to ask, how did you, once again, I have to decide this as a reporter, how did you find out that who did you get your information from, if you can say, about that there might have been a suicide note?
From my parents.
From your parents? Do you have any idea how they heard about that? Any ideas?
No, I'm not. My dad was a state constable, so I don't know if maybe he talked with, one of the police involved, and he actually, my dad would actually ride as with the Greenville County Sheriff's deputy. He volunteered and would ride with him, so that whatever deputy he would ride with. In South Carolina, state constables, they have statewide authority, and we got certified to ride with the sheriff's department. We spent a lot of time with the sheriff's deputies.
What's a constable do in South Carolina, Hal? What's their main function?
That's a good question.
Okay.
From what I know, I mean, as a volunteer, has to be appointed by the governor, and of course, I mean, all the investigation backgrounds and all of that. And then my uncle was a state constable also after my dad. So what they would do is that they would ride with either the Greenville Sheriff's Department or the local police department, which my uncle rode a lot with the Malden Police Department.
Okay.
And just as an extra person to kind of help them.
Okay.
But they have full authority throughout the state.
Okay.
So.
It almost sounds like kind of a citizens oversight type of thing or something.
Well, I don't know if it's a citizens oversight, but they are private citizens. It is a volunteer position or an appointment. It's a volunteer appointment by the governor, and they have to be certified and things of that nature. But they have the full authority throughout the state. So I mean, full arrest authority and whatever. But what I know, most of them assist their local police departments.
Okay. All right, and I think we've talked a little bit more about Jo Ellen Brothers' suicide, but I think we just need to leave it at that. I think we may have strayed too far into conjecture and theory territory. But how far did he live from Jo Ellen and Doug back in 1997?
About 100 miles away. He lived in Columbia, South Carolina, which was, I don't know, 95, 98, 100, 105 miles away. Depends on which part of Columbia he lived in. And so about 100 miles away, roughly.
Okay. All right, just have some questions. I've asked you about Jo Ellen. She eventually, though, did declare Doug legally deceased in 2004, right?
Correct.
How did your family feel about that?
As far as the action itself, they were fine with it. I mean, he'd been missing for 7 years. The kids would get, his Social Security.
Right.
So that was assistance because, I mean, it had been a struggle financially for them.
Yeah.
I mean, the family supported them. Their church supported them. Friends supported them. But it's still, it was a struggle. And
Mm-hmm.
so my parents were actually okay. The family was okay with her doing it. What the issue was there, and I don't remember if you and I talked about this or not, but the issue there was that she changed the date of the hearing and didn't tell mom and dad, and that upset them because they wanted to be there for the hearing, not to prevent it, because they didn't want to prevent it. They just wanted to be there for the hearing. Mm-hmm. And she changed the date and didn't let them know. So that caused an issue.
Any reason why? Did she give an explanation to your knowledge of why she did that?
What I'd heard, I don't know if she said this, I'm assuming she did. I think my other brother had talked to her about it, and she didn't want mom and dad to prevent her from getting it. Well, they couldn't have prevented her from getting it. Doug had been gone for 7 years, and there was nothing that they could have done, which they wouldn't anyway. They weren't against her getting, or the kids getting the benefit. They just wanted to be present for it.
Mm-hmm. Right. I
for
can
the
understand
hearing.
it. Okay. So she waited. As many listeners know, we've had people declared legally deceased in much shorter time than that. And it always does bring a kind of a big question mark as to why it happened so quickly. But she waited 7 years, even though it seems that she'd done it earlier. She would have gotten this money, as you already mentioned, much earlier. But she did wait 7 years, which is pretty standard. Of course, we've covered disappearances that are 30 years old, and the person's still not declared deceased, so I guess it works both ways. Okay.
Right.
Does she still live in the area of Simpsonville, South Carolina, where she and Doug live together?
Same house.
Same house. Okay.
Yes.
Did she ever get marry again? I guess being that he was declared legally deceased, that automatically, I guess, means they're not married anymore. Did she ever get married again? Have any other children?
No, she never got married again.
No children?
No other children, no.
Okay. We've already talked about witnesses. We have maybe one witness who might have seen Doug. I'm not sure about that, but that's been it. Has anybody in your family back then, because I think this is going to continue to be the issue with this disappearance, anybody, once again, just point blank asked her, you thought that, just say it, or, that was a little, uncaring, unsympathetic that you went to Disney while your husband is missing? Does anybody point blank just say that to her, to your knowledge?
Actually, yes. Speaking with my aunt, her husband did, my uncle.
Mm-hmm.
He had a different relationship with her. She actually would tell him everything and would involve him in everything. So he point blank asked her, "Why are you going to Disney World when Doug is missing?"
Mm-hmm.
And her response was that she didn't want to disappoint their 3-year-old daughter.
Okay. All right. That's what she said. Okay. And I want everybody to know, although this conversation with Doug's daughter is still off the record, I want you to know that I talked to her about that very same topic, but I'm not going to get into it at this point unless she allows me to say it publicly. All right. Let me ask you this. Regarding Doug's schedule, was he ever known to go home for dinner in the evening and then go back out to work?
Yeah, I cannot specifically remember. It seems like I remember that being the case, but I can't swear to it. I asked my two aunts and didn't know.
Okay. Because once again, I don't think I am speaking out of school here, is that when somebody's car is found so close to their home, people start thinking about the wife or the husband. Of course, if this was totally switched around, let's just say, and it was a woman's car that was found a mile from her house, I know what a lot of listeners would be thinking.
Right.
And that's why I think I just have to ask you once again, the way you understood Doug and his schedule, did he ever go to work and work for a while, then go home for dinner to have dinner with his wife and his kids, and then go back out maybe in the evening for another job? That's why I feel like I have to ask you that.
Yeah, and like I say, it seems like I remember him doing that some, but I don't think that was the norm.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't swear that.
Mm-hmm. It might have happened, but once again, you have your own life to live, right?
Right.
You're not keeping tabs
Right.
on him. You're not there. You don't even work with him in the plumbing business. So you just, you just can't be sure. I'm just wondering if maybe somebody who might have known a little bit more, maybe like your parents living in the area, might have, known something about that. I think that might be helpful in trying to determine, that, is it possible, because his car was headed toward his house, not away from his house. Is it possible that just something happened on the way home? Okay.
I do know. Well, let me tell you this. I do know of one incident that he had ran into my uncle and aunt, the uncle that had asked, "Why are you going?"
Mm-hmm.
And she had asked him to take something back to their house, and he said, "Well, I've got this other job. Let me call, find out what's going on." And he called home, and there was an argument, and he's like, "Okay, just don't worry about it. I'll be home. I'll fix dinner. It'll be fine, and then I'll go to my other job." I do remember that specifically, and my aunt told me that specifically. So at least at one time.
Okay.
But
well, we maybe have at least one. Okay.
I don't think it was every time, but I do not think it was abnormal.
All right. What's this been like, Hal? Of course, your parents, I guess, are deceased now, but you do have another brother, and you have other people who are surely still alive. Once again, Doug's children, who at least one of them might have known him. The 4-month-old, of course, has no memory of him. What's this been like for the last 23 years?
It's been difficult on everyone, obviously. I think it's been the hardest on them, not growing up with a dad and not knowing and having to deal with the things that they've had to deal with and what they've been told. Obviously, it's hard on the rest of the family. We love Doug. We want to know what happened. We want to bring closure for everyone, friends and family.
Yeah.
I think about him every day. I have for 23 years. I mean, like I said earlier, Doug and I were extremely close. But it's hard on the entire family. But I think the ones that have suffered the most, obviously, are his children.
Mm-hmm. Over the years, 23 years, were you able to keep in contact with Doug's kids?
No. After she had him legally declared dead, shortly thereafter, there was all contact was cut off with us and the kids, and we did not see them for years.
Mm-hmm.
And Mom and Dad passed without seeing them.
Wow.
My dad passed in 2007, and my mother passed in 2015.
Wow. But recently
and
you did.
Grandkids were everything to them, more than their kids.
Yeah, that's the way grandparents are. Yeah.
Right.
But you did get to, though, very recently get together with Doug's daughter.
I did.
Mm-hmm.
I did.
And how was that?
It was excellent. We reconnected. We just spent the long weekend just talking and getting to know each other again.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Great.
And that is the
and I'm
listeners.
talking to his other child also. We haven't actually seen each other, but there's conversation, which is phenomenal. And I mean, this is no secret. They're estranged from their mother, so that's why we're we have over the last couple of years have been able to reestablish some connection.
Okay. Right, and you had told me that yes, the children had not talked to their mother in a while, some years.
Correct.
Some years. Okay. To ask you this point blank, even though he left before, do you believe your brother Doug would ever voluntarily leave his family again, like he did in 1994? Could you ever, fathom that?
No, I do not. From the bottom of my heart, 100%, I do not believe that.
Okay. Is there anything since 1997 that you might have found, just once again, taking an interest in his disappearance, trying to figure out what happened? Anything that you found out about Doug that you didn't know about him while he was still around? We talk so much about his bipolar affliction, but drug addiction or, hanging out with the wrong crowd, criminal activities, anything like that has popped up in the last 23 years?
Not that I'm aware of. Obviously there were things I didn't know. There were people that he knew that I didn't know.
Yeah.
One person in particular that he was hanging out with Doug, or Doug was hanging out with him, that had a somewhat sordid history. When I say somewhat sordid, I meant kind of a drug use history. But there was no evidence that Doug was using drugs. And I've talked with a couple other people that we both know. I mean, they've contacted me recently, actually, that they were hanging out with Doug and everything was fine. I mean, there was no, drug use, and there was no, they were just friends. And, but, that one person, Doug was seen with him a few times, but to the best of my knowledge, it wasn't an extensive period of time. And if Doug was doing drugs, Doug could not handle it. He just reacted
poorly.
He was on the one end of the spectrum. Some people can do some drugs and they're fine. I mean, not fine, but they don't go off the deep end. Doug's personality was such that he would always go off the deep end. Everything was extreme with him.
Right. Okay.
So if he was doing drugs, it would have been very evident. There would have been activity, there would have been behavior that was, telltale signs of him doing it, and there wasn't.
Okay. I have to ask, because this has happened before, not a lot, but family members think they know that person in their family, and then after the person goes missing, they start digging into what the person was into, and they find out that, wow, we only knew half this person's life. This person was living, some type of other life that he or she was keeping out of our sight. Doesn't happen a lot, but it's happened enough times that I think I have to mention it. Of course, maybe a disappearance that comes to mind is the disappearance of a young woman, Ashley Kohler, from California, who, by all accounts, was a pretty, decent young woman. And then after she disappeared, it turned out her mother found out that she was a call girl. And this is a disappearance that still is unsolved. And I guess that's what I kind of mean. Of course, many people believe that Ashley's disappearance connected to that activity. And that's the kind of thing that I guess that I'm asking you. I'm not saying Doug was a prostitute or anything. I'm just saying things that he was, hiding from others. You've not discovered anything like that over the last 23 years.
Have not discovered anything like that. I've talked with a lot of people. I have personally investigated this fairly actively for 23 years. Anytime that there was and we've had alleged, or not alleged, there's been people in the past that said, oh, I saw Doug. Yeah. And I would drive or fly from wherever. I mean, they would contact me. Friends would contact me. People would contact me. And I would drive or fly from wherever I was at to investigate it. And, of course, it never was Doug. It was always someone else or, whatever. But and we'd always notify the sheriff's department. Right. But it was never Doug.
It hasn't panned out. Right.
Yeah. And so the point is that I have investigated extensively this over the past 23 years. I've talked with a lot of people. My family has been part of that and have talked with a lot of people. And nothing has surfaced.
Okay.
Anything's possible. I'm not saying that it's not. But you would think with as much as we have investigated, as many people as we have talked to, something would have come up and nothing has surfaced. And again, Doug's personality and Doug's reaction to, drugs and alcohol was fairly extreme. And so in the case, there would have been extreme behavior. And there wasn't extreme behavior.
Okay. I have to ask you maybe one more question, maybe some of the listeners' minds. Given the area where his truck was found, is this an area? Once again, I know it's been 23 years, but we do. I don't know. I wouldn't say it's once a month, but it happens. Maybe hunters will be out and they'll come across human remains. Is this the type of area where people are going out into the woods a lot, maybe for hiking or hunting, that they might happen upon human remains? Is this that type of area or not? I know I've looked at the satellite views. I know there are trees and things, but is it that type of area or not?
No, it's not really that type of area. It is truly a residential area. I mean, it's just high-end homes are on all of those pieces of property. There's pieces of property. I'm talking when I say large pieces, acres of property with a high-end home, and that entire road is basically that. So there would probably be homeowners, residents, that would be out walking around maybe on their property, but there would not be hunters, there would not be hikers, walking through that area. It would only be more of residents and homeowners and visitors to those residences that would walk in that area. Okay.
And, of course, it's been 23 years. Has that area changed much? Has there been a lot of building that's gone on League Road since 1997, or would you say it's pretty much the same as it was back then?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I've actually only recall being on, even though I grew up in the area, I only recall being on League Road twice, and both of those times was referenced where Doug's truck was to look at the area. Okay.
I guess what I'm thinking is,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, of course, we know that the U.S. population continues to move, south more and more. And, South Carolina is one of those states that they do move to. If there's been building going on in that area, if there's any new homes or anything that have been built on League Road that, you just never know, the, construction site or something, somebody comes across something. Because there was a disappearance in North Carolina, Crystal Morrison. She went missing under, I wouldn't say similar circumstances, but, there was the idea that there might be foul play or something, but it turned out that there wasn't. But her remains were found in some woods by some surveyors because a road in that area was going to get widened because it was getting busier and busier. Surveyors go onto this private property, and there her remains were found after 8 years. I guess that's what I'm asking you. Is there something like that could happen in the future if we're, to believe maybe his remains are still in the area? No,
it could happen. Yes, I mean it.
Okay.
And from what I understand, I wasn't told this. Doug's daughter told me this. Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I have that correct.
Okay.
She said that when she talked with the investigator, that he was talking about maybe getting a forensics team to go back out to the area and search again. Whether that has occurred or not, I'm not sure. But and I think she told me this last week.
Okay.
Within the last couple of weeks, she's told me that. So.
Okay. Well, that would be interesting for them to do that after 23 years. As you would probably imagine, disappearances that get to be 23 years old, there's usually not a lot of breaking information on them. Yeah, it happens, and in fact, on Unfound, we just had one solved that was 30 years old, where it ended up being a murder, as a lot of people thought from day one. So these things do happen. It's just there's usually not breaking news all the time on, murders or disappearance or any other type of crimes that, are 23 years old. But that would be interesting if, they were doing that after all this time. I think that's good news. Okay.
Yeah, I was excited about it.
Okay.
And, happy that anything that's being done like that.
Yeah. Do you have a
It's just occurring.
Yeah. Do you have a Facebook page or website, anything like that set up for Doug's disappearance?
Actually, we have never done that. I'm embarrassed to say. I just have never really thought about it. But now that this has been, the sheriff's department what the new sheriff had done is has taken several cold cases and sort of put a new spotlight on them. And Doug's case was one of the ones that he decided to bring forward and put a new spotlight on. He signed a new investigator, and so all this is just sort of resurfaced. And I am not one of the most tech savvy people out there, and but it's not a bad idea, and I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't yet.
Okay.
But yeah, I should.
Yeah, you probably should. You're not the first guest to be on Unfound that doesn't have a Facebook page set up, but being that we're now friends on Facebook, and I know you're in the discussion group, you might find some listeners who have helped others set up Facebook pages. Maybe somebody could help you with that, maybe give you, some tips, a little tutorial on how to do that. Once this episode comes out, you might try to do that.
Now, I have a personal Facebook page, and I've discussed, about Doug, but I do not have one specifically or a website specifically set up for Doug.
Yeah, you should. I'm going to suggest you do that, and I think there will probably be some people in Unfound's audience that, once again, if you want some tips, help, whatever else, they've done it in the past, and I know they'd like to do that for you too. Probably.
I am completely open to everything.
All right, great. Hal, any final words before we complete this interview?
Other than the fact, Ed, that I really appreciate you doing this. I know that you do a lot and you've helped a lot of people, and it just means a lot to me and the family and our friends that you're doing this. And if anyone has any information whatsoever, no matter how small, the smallest things can lead to something bigger. Please let us know. We just want resolutions. We just want closure.
Right. Okay.
I just want to find my brother.
Right. Okay, and I hope Unfound can help you do that. I hope.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I hope. And I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
You're very welcome, Hal.
And that was my interview with Hal Jones, brother of Doug Jones. I thank him for joining me and all of you on the program. I also got to speak to one of Doug's children, but the agreement was that we would keep the conversation off the record. However, I think I can say this. Doug's wife never said anything that led her children to believe she caused Doug's disappearance, although the children do understand the facts of the disappearance could point in that direction. Before I get into my summation, I want to remind all of you that I've done a video for Doug's disappearance on the Unfound YouTube channel to explain the routes and locations that are important in this case. The tough part about Doug's disappearance is he was stereotypically the perfect candidate to leave his life. He had done so before. He was in a bad marriage. He had mental issues that, although seemingly under control, we have learned on Unfound how precarious good mental health is. He just got $1,500 in cash. Plus, there was the pressure of going on a family trip. Yes, those kinds of vacations can be fun, but they can be stressful. And maybe even more so for someone like Doug, who struggled with his own stability, although it had not been an issue recently. Really, I'm not trying to make any of you lean in any particular way, but I can't avoid the facts either. On the other hand, would Doug really leave his truck so close to his house if he planned to run off? Remember, the first time he took off, Doug drove the whole way to Charlotte. He didn't ditch his vehicle and hitchhike. So if Doug did walk out of his life, he seemed to have chosen a different way the second time. As for the foul play possibility, I know many of you will concentrate on the Disney trip Joe Ellen took, even though Doug was missing. And I will admit, the first time I heard it, it was strange. It certainly seemed cold and suspicious. But after thinking about it a bit, I have to put myself in her shoes. Since Doug had left before, I can see, at least conceivably, that Jo Ellen convinced herself that Doug ran off again and would be back whenever. Plus, they had a bad marriage anyway. And it very well could be that they would have lost the money for rooms and tickets and whatever else, just because Doug decided to go off the grid for 24 hours. And even though I don't know Jo Ellen, I get the impression she does have a very vindictive type of personality. I could see her having some kind of here, take that, Doug moment and go to Disney without him. So before you judge Jo Ellen too harshly, think about the bad relationships you've been in and think about the questionable actions you've taken. Yet, this really comes down to a simple point. Did Doug go home that evening or not? If so, why didn't neighbors say they saw his truck? His home was in a residential neighborhood with houses on all sides. Not to mention, as a guy who had a fix-it job at one time, rarely did I want to go home then back out. I usually just wanted to crank out all the work I had and go home without having to worry about going back out. And I think that's the natural way most people in those types of jobs are. So could it be that something happened to Doug on the job? I'll leave the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.